Hi, this is your host Swapnil Bhatia. Welcome to our special issue of Let's Talk for KubeCon EU, and we have with us once again Isaac Mosquera, CTO at Armory. Isaac, it's great to have you back on the show.
Hey, well, thanks for having me again. It's always great to talk to you.
Yes, our audience, they already know what Armory is, but it's great to hear from you. Tell us a bit about what is Armory all about.
Yeah, so what Armory is really focused on is bringing reliable deployments to the enterprise. One of the challenges and problems that enterprises and larger organizations face today is really centered around the sprawling infrastructure. Every year it feels like you have a new piece of infrastructure launched by one of these cloud providers. And, that presents a lot of security and reliability challenges to these enterprises. So we're really trying to tame that sprawling infrastructure and bring that reliable experience to developers.
Armory is heavily invested in Spinnaker. You have been there from the very early on. And now today, everybody is using Kubernetes. People are trying to run their toasters on Kubernetes as well. So talk about how do you help customers leverage both of these technologies, which are both open source. They're both part of Linux Foundation and the CDN Foundation and CNCF, to build users' own CD pipeline?
So what we're observing is when people deploy to multiple clusters and they need to do it reliably, it becomes a lot more complicated and challenging due to many different factors, in particular around observability. How do you know that you should continue to roll out? Or how do you know that you should roll back safely? And what does it even mean to roll back? So what Spinnaker and Armory help you do is for these very complicated enterprise level deployments that reach millions of users, how do you do that safely without really damaging your brand and deploying to everybody all at one time? And a big part of that is the way that we do blue-greens, which really don't come out of the box for Kubernetes, right? They depend on users and other tools like ourselves to do that for them.
We have had this discussion earlier also that if you look at continuous delivery, it's kind of a solved problem, but the way it was solved was a lot of patching used to be done in early days with Jenkins and all those things. People would like to write scripts and stuff. And Jenkins itself is part of the CD Foundation as well. So talk about, if we do look at Armory solution of Spinnaker along with Kubernetes, how different it is from Jenkins. Let's just focus on, because when we look at cloud native, things become complicated very quickly. So what happens is most of the time is people spend more time in doing all this unnecessary plumbing versus writing that business application. So how are you, the combo of Spinnaker and Kubernetes, helping developers or DevOps or SREs?
Yeah, that's a perfect question. One of the things that we observe is that if you look at Jenkins or you look at Tecton, who's also part of the CDF, or Circle CI, most of them started off as these CI tools that have pipelines in them, but the pipelines are actually pretty good. Where things start to really fall apart is during the deployment phase, when things have to be released into production. And none of these tools are really purpose-built for kind of pushing those things into production. And they require you, the developer or the operator, to build a bunch of scripts, either written in Python or Shell or whatever that may be, to really stitch together and glue together all of the things that are missing inside of Kubernetes. As we mentioned earlier, Kubernetes gives you a really nice day one experience, but the complications of multiple clusters, they don't solve for that. And neither does Jenkins, but it does give you this great pipeline. Now, what we're starting to do really is we're trying to integrate into Jenkins, integrate into GitHub Actions, integrate into Circle CI, so that you can delegate out the deployment in a declarative fashion, right? So you're actually just specifying your intent and not writing imperative code. When we start writing imperative code, or users start writing imperative code, I think that's when we start to really get in trouble, because everybody starts doing it in many different ways. And you get this, fragmentation. And how do we deploy to production? Well, Isaac does it one way and Jennifer does it another way. When you can do it in a declarative interface, then it's all kind of streamlined and done in a very similar fashion, while giving developers that flexibility they need.
One thing more that I do want to ask is that if you look at today's world, security has kind of become really serious topic. It's no longer an afterthought. People are trying to put it as part of developers' pipeline, their workflow, which means that it's getting into CD itself. So talk about how is Armory help? I mean, the name itself, Armory, if you look at it's armor, right? So how do you also ensure not only ease of use, not only being able to move fast, but also maintain the security and safety of the workload, at least with this fast pace?
Yeah, another excellent question here. What we're starting to see is this shift left mentality, which I think is good. Like, how do you catch security and bugs earlier in the development process, right? And as more of these tools integrate with these existing pipelines like Jenkins and GitHub Actions, you'll see them catching a lot of these bugs earlier, and I think lead to faster feedback loops. But ultimately, at the end of the day, when things become real, is when you move from, development or QA into production. That's when things ultimately matter, right? And so some of the things that we're doing is making sure at the point of production or deployment into production, and you're going to deploy into production level clusters, what we want to do is make sure at that point in time that you have done everything that you need to do to make sure that your app is secure and you're not introducing risk into your environment. And the way that we do that is, again, through this declarative interface. Now, what happens behind the scenes, what a security team, a platform team, or an operations team can set up by using OPA, right, Open Policy Agent, which is also part of the CNCF, is start specifying the rules and the policies that are needed in order to get your application to production, right? Some of those things might be, does Isaac have access to the cluster? Did Swapno, approve this before it went into production? There's a set of rules and a set of checklists that must be done before pushing to production. So while these tools are pushing things to the left, which I think is critically important, I think ultimately you need that final check, and we are that final check for things moving into production, so that you know that whatever is in production has gone through compliance and internal corporate policy, and you're not putting something into production that ultimately introduces risk for the enterprise.
When you're explaining that, what I see is that it is as much about technology, it seems to be as much about process, how we do things as well. I mean, with all this technology, even if you look at DevOps or SREs, it's less, there's no technology, it's about the way we do things. So on top of technology, are there some best practices also which DevOps, SREs or developers should follow to have a very smooth pipeline there?
Yeah. This is it's a interesting point here, because one of the things that I'm observing is this idea of, we want to push into production in 10, 15 minutes. The ideal is there. The challenge and the problem with that, for most, consumer grade or production grade applications, is that you haven't gained enough signals or confidence that what you're pushing into production is in fact safe. And when I say safe in this particular context, it's more about making sure that there's no bugs or affecting your user base in some way that it's not meant to affect them. And you can have drastic effects. And so I think one of the things that we really encourage our customers to do is spend a little bit more time on your road to production, slow it down a little bit, right? And make sure that you're getting the signals. Now, we have an automated canary analysis tool that will grab the signals from, Datadog or New Relic, system level metrics, but also infrastructure level metrics, but then also business level metrics, right? So if, for example, you push out a change and the CPU looks okay, and maybe your thread count looks okay, but your number of checkouts per second or transactions per second go way down, you probably don't want to have that into production. And being able to spend a little bit more time to get sure you have enough signals to be confident, I think, is important. It doesn't mean that you have to spend 24 hours rolling something out into production, but I think that there's kind of need to go so fast pushing in production. I think there needs to be a balance between that and the risk that it introduces into the enterprise. I think there's another thing that we're also encouraging our customers and the market to do, which is really centered around like measuring, what does increased velocity mean to you? What does productivity look like to you? So when you go and use a new tool like Kubernetes or a new piece of infrastructure like Kubernetes, you can compare and contrast like, hey, moving to Kubernetes made us, 10% more reliable and allowed us to, do 10 more deployments every single day. And now we are more productive. And I think that's a really important thing, the ability to measure things. So I think too many people are making a lot of decisions about Kubernetes and deployments without really understanding what the impact of those decisions are. And when we do that, I think we actually move slower as an industry versus faster, because we need to prove to the skeptics out there that these are the right technologies, these are the right processes, these are the right cultural values. It's not just developers wanting to play around with new technology.
You mentioned having that confidence there. How do you ensure that your users have that confidence that while they're moving fast, while they are touching all these new technologies that did not even exist 6 months earlier, and they're also trying to stay safe?
Yeah, I tend to go back to data, 9 times out of 10 to show like these are the results of your actions, or these are the results of your decisions. And you can compare and contrast. And so that confidence comes from the data. That confidence also comes from user stories where, one of the reasons ultimately I started Armory with my co-founders is we felt what it meant to be more reliable. We were measuring everything, but also you could sense and feel the excitement in the room from the developers. You could sense the excitement inside of the company. When things are constantly breaking or you're afraid to push things into production, you know what you do? You don't push into production. You don't push to production as often. And ultimately, any developer, anybody who's a builder, not just developers, anybody who builds things, ultimately wants to see their thing go live and also be used by people. The better you could be at deployments and CD, the more things you will be able to push into production, the more ideas you can test out, the more things that you will be able to put there. And it starts with having that confidence. And once the team has confidence of pushing them into production, you'll see your ideas fly. You'll see ideas being generated and tried all the time. And it's an entirely different feeling. So I can show you the data of how this is better. But ultimately, what we're trying to drive is that feeling of confidence, that feeling of joy and happiness of building and putting things into customers' hands, right? Like that's really what we all strive to do, right? That's what you do with your content, right? That excitement and that joy that people get from watching your content, right? Putting that into the world. So it's all about putting ideas into the world. And in doing so, I think we really make builders, whether you're building content or code or whatever it may be, like happy, and joyful. I mean, this is what we're all put on this planet to be. And so ultimately that's like what I want to show enterprises. Like work doesn't have to be so sad. Work doesn't have to be so scary when you put things into production. It could actually be a joyful moment. And hopefully we can bring that to the world.
Today, we talk about everything is infrastructure as a code. GitOps is, once again, a new word, buzzword. SRE is nothing new, but that is becoming a new. So we are again going through this movement of, is GitOps or SRE going to replace DevOps? What does it look like? But I think essentially what all of us are trying to do is what you said, to just focus on those things and have time not to have worry about. We can call it whatever we want to call it. It's just so talk about how do you see this movement of GitOps, SREs versus DevOps. It's all about how you do things basically.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a great point. I don't think that SRE and platform teams go away. I think what really is happening is that it's more streamlined and it's behind the scenes. So when you look at where does the SRE and platform tools go, they're just kind of hidden. They're doing the work behind the scene. They're ensuring that things are up, right? If you look at Kubernetes, most of what happens inside of Kubernetes is behind the scenes, right? And I think when you look at what we're doing here at Armory, we want to play into the GitOps model, because what I see is a really nice way for developers to interact with infrastructure through code and Git, where if you look at GitHub or GitLab, they have amazing tools to be able to track who did what, when, and where. There's amazing tools to revert things, amazing tools to compare and diff. If we didn't leverage those tools, what are we doing? We're just going to be creating the same thing, whether you're an SRE person or a platform team. And that's pretty frustrating for a developer to like, oh man, I got to go to this tool to see this, and I got to go to this tool to see this. But it's really Git is becoming that centralized place to see all of your changes across your development lifecycle. And I welcome it. And you may not see a UI from Spinnaker or Armory here in the future, and maybe lessened. But I think the value we bring to the world is still the same. The value that we bring is maybe even greater now because it's more accessible to those developers who just want a streamlined environment. Ultimately, they just want to write code and get it into production and not have to fumble around with the 30 different CD tools that exist out there. So I think the GitOps movement is a really important one. And I think it gets back to getting developers to be more productive and enjoy their work.
Isaac, thank you so much for once again taking time out today and talk about it. I wish we could have done this in person, but I hope that with vaccine here and everything else, we'll see each other in person and sit down and have those long discussions once again. So thanks for your time, and I look forward to the next discussion.
Hey, thank you very much. I look forward to it as well.